And welcome once again to a bonus meat grinder. Meet Pete McGuagan and I coming at you again for the third time, after the picks. Third time this week, the second meat grinder. We decided to do a little something for extra this week because, given all the talk about the playoffs, which we talked all about on the meat grinder for this week, you can go back and watch that. We decided to get a little different perspective from somebody whose state has already done this. And I'm talking about Danny Ventura of the Boston Herald. Now, if you know anything about Massachusetts football, you know they also had Thanksgiving a few years back. They still have Thanksgiving, but what they did was very unique. It was something that was proposed in Connecticut about 12 or 13 years ago. I think Steve Philpone had this idea where you start you start earlier, and then you start the playoffs in November. And then what Massachusetts does is they take a break after the semifinals, and anybody who has a Thanksgiving Day game that they want to play, they play it. And then they move on the next week to the state championships. We talked a little bit with Danny. We get his perspective on it. We've heard about all the Connecticut coaches, what they think, and all that good stuff. But we decided to bring Danny on because he can at least show you what it looks like on the other side of this decision. Who likes it, who doesn't. I went into this not knowing what his opinion was or what he thought of it or what a lot of the Massachusetts. I know I saw stories from some of the Mass coaches who weren't like overly thrilled. They thought they ruined its Thanksgiving, but I didn't know other than what Danny brought to the table. I had no idea going into how this would go. Fascinating interview with him. We talked a lot about things, and you'll find you see even after changing it, there's still a lot of the same problems. So here's a little bonus meat grinder coverage. Sit back and enjoy before you head out to your games and get a little from Danny Ventura of the Boston Herald. Joining us on the show is the man, the myth, the legend up at Boston, the Boston Herald. It's Danny Ventura, 30-year veteran covering high school sports up there. That's the guy you want to talk to. And Danny, thanks for joining us here on the meat grinder. And basically, I don't know what your thoughts on it was, but we're dealing with everyone wants to change the playoffs here in Connecticut and get rid of Thanksgiving. And what better than to look north to see our neighbors and what Massachusetts did? They basically did the same thing to expand the playoffs, get the western part of the state a little more involved. They did bowl games for a while. It's only been, it hasn't even been 10 years since they made the change to start the playoffs in November and then go through and kind of like remove Thanksgiving. They still play Thanksgiving Day games, right? Still.
Yeah, everyone plays, which is part of the problem. I think this is where you have the big disconnect. I mean, in order to have what people would call perfect playoff system, you almost have to do away with Thanksgiving. And there are some people who are saying, you know what, I'm fine with that. Let's get rid of Thanksgiving. But then you get the traditionalists who are up in arms. How dare you say something like that? We've been playing over 100 years. We're not getting rid of this game. So you're stuck in the middle. I mean, to me, the way I look at it, I'm on the back nine of my career. I don't see Thanksgiving going as far as Massachusetts. I don't see Thanksgiving going anytime soon.
So it's weird though. It's like right before this. It's the week before the state playoffs. Like everyone takes a week off, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically what you have here is, you're in the playoffs right now. And if you're fortunate enough to get to the state semifinal, you're playing the Friday or Saturday before Thanksgiving. If you are not, you've got 13 or 14 days off before the Thanksgiving Day game.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel that's kind of worked out? I mean, again, especially with a lot of those programs up there who would play Thanksgiving games, but are also maybe playing the state final. I've seen things where they don't take it as seriously. Have they ever canceled it? I mean, how has that been working out?
Well, they don't cancel it, but what people have done is essentially they've taken a knee. One year Duxbury took a lot of heat because they basically said, we're not playing our starters. So they used their JVs, which infuriated the opposition because they said they cheapened the game and they wound up putting 50-something points on them. But, Duxbury wound up winning the Super Bowl. So at the end of the day, their argument was, when we start the season, are we playing to win on Thanksgiving or are we playing to win a state championship?
Right.
And then you got the smaller schools, one year Millis was there and they did not. And their coach said, we have 18 kids on our roster. mean, if I lose one kid, that's 3 starters because he basically plays offense, defense, special teams. Now, if I had a roster where I had 90 or 100 kids, yeah, I'd send everyone out there. So there are a lot of arguments to be made both ways.
Right. What is your general sense? I mean, granted, now our proposal says they try to eliminate that. They say we're not going to do Thanksgiving then. We're going to move it to, we're going to have the state championships be that weekend, and we're going to play the semis the weekend before, and the rivalry games are going to go to Columbus Day. But your general sense is, I mean, the same thing is in effect here. Even though you guys are still playing Thanksgiving Day, they're very much nerfed unless both teams are not in the playoffs anymore. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. If you're a team that's going to the Super Bowl, you might treat it differently. There are some schools who still, even if they're going to the Super Bowl, they feel like Thanksgiving is big. We want to win on Thanksgiving, and if somebody gets hurt, it's going to happen regardless. Then they've gone with that philosophy.
What is your general sense about how the state as a whole, do they miss it? Do they like? I mean, give me a rough estimate, and then maybe give me your take of what you think.
Well, I think I think for the most part, like any system, and you've probably had this in Connecticut, you're not going to get 100% approval. Right. I think more people like it than not. Now, again, in Massachusetts, it depends on where you were 2 weekends ago. If you were in Everett, you hated the system because Everett was a legit top 10 team in the state. They were in Division I, but their power rating is so bad they didn't even make the playoffs.
Right. What are they, 7-2 or something like that?
They were 7-1. The problem is, they were in Division I. The league they play in is the Greater Boston League. All 6 of their opponents in the league are in Division III, and 4 of the 6 were probably the last 4 teams rated in the division. They all had bad records, so they didn't pick up any points there. But it frustrates them. A team like Central Catholic, who went 3-5, however, 3-5 with a killer schedule, wound up being the 9 seed or 9 or 10. So and that infuriates them. Then the flip side is you get a Stoneham who started the season 0-4. Under any other prior system, the season is probably over for them. But because you got 8 weeks, they won their last 4. They got in as a 15 seed, went on the road and knocked off the 2nd seed. So for them, they love this system.
How does Massachusetts organize? Like, I mean, is it done by how do they do their leagues? How do they set those leagues up?
Well, basically, I mean, everyone has their own league, but as far as, to qualify for the playoffs, it's all power ratings. So, and this is another argument. People seem to think, by having power ratings, you've taken away, who cares if you win the league? It does you no good. Others have said, maybe put in a stipulation where if you win the league, you get an automatic berth, which might, at least adds to you have to win the league.
Right. That sounds like a similar problem, doesn't it, Pete? Jeez. Sounds like we have that same deal here. And the leagues just don't matter here. They're all done by power ranking. Were they always power rankings?
They started the last few years. Prior to that, the last system was that if you won prior to the points and all that, if you won your league, you were in automatically.
Wow.
And then the playoffs were all determined by, size of school and what happens. Now the flip side of that is you wound up getting teams that were going 10-1, but because they lost to the league champion, they were home on Thanksgiving. And that was, 1 year, I think we had 4 of our top 7 teams didn't make the playoffs, and they were all 10-1 or 9-1.
Wow.
So go ahead, Pete.
Well, you're talking about teams being left at home, right now in the system in Connecticut, there's 6 divisions, 8 teams are going to make the playoffs. And some divisions, you're looking at 2 lost teams, 3 lost teams might be going home. And in other divisions, you're like 3 win teams might get a home game. That's exaggerating a little bit, but there are potentially 3-4 win teams that are going to make the playoffs in certain divisions, and 7-3 teams are going to be at home in other divisions. And now in this new proposal, they want to expand that number to 12 to offset, to make sure more get in and then do a bye. And the question is, for me at least, is enough at any spot? I mean, in Massachusetts, has anyone just been like, hey, it's okay if you don't make the playoffs?
Not if you're one of the teams that doesn't make the playoffs. That's not. If you're Everett, no. I don't think I would say that in Everett. But I think what happens now is because in Massachusetts, we're not a big state. but we have 8 divisions, which, I mean, people are saying,
That's
this is
insane.
oversaturated, and you have 16 teams in each division getting in. And a lot of people are saying, why not just go expand the season one more week, go 9 weeks, and then have 8 teams get in. But then, people say, well, if you're the 9 seed, I mean, so you can never make everybody happy.
What would you like to see? I mean, if it was up to you, if Danny Ventura was in charge of everything, what would you do?
I'll tell you what, which got proposed to me actually at a tournament management committee meeting. One of the members there said he had a suggestion, but it just went nowhere. Is start the season on Labor Day, because everyone scrimmages that weekend anyway. So maybe start the preseason like 3 or 4 days earlier, open the season Labor Day weekend. You have your 8 games. You have your 3 playoffs. The Super Bowls are played the Friday or Saturday before Thanksgiving. And then Thanksgiving is the big it. That's it. It's everyone's last hurrah. So, the game will still have meaning for, if you're a senior, it might be the last time you ever play football.
So you say maybe after instead you do bowl games, and then you do another like
you do your Thanksgiving Day game the week after the bowls.
Huh. That's what I have not heard yet.
Yeah, I mean, but that one has got no legs.
Yeah,
I mean, the proposal that's being pushed out there is to go 11 games, start the playoffs after Thanksgiving like they used to. Now, the flip side is you're rankling the feathers of the winter coaches who are like, hey, haven't you had enough time to have your season and your champions? Why are you cutting into our season? And that's a big thing, a dilemma for the athletic directors, because if they side with the football coach, all of a sudden you get every winter coach in your office saying, oh, so you're playing favorites, essentially.
Wow.
Yeah, we're having a little bit of that issue here because in this proposal, they would move the season up. It would end the weekend of Thanksgiving, and winter coaches would have all their kids for the full year, which
right.
In the 10 years that I've done this, I haven't seen that many football, basketball, hockey crossovers. I know they exist. I'm not saying they don't. But the big one a lot of people keep bringing up is wrestling. And like, I don't have a problem with wrestling. Wrestling's an awesome sport.
Right.
But the dual meets in wrestling in November and December really aren't the big ones, right? It's the quad meets, it's the conference meets, it's
Once
the
you
big
get into
tournaments.
the sectionals where you're trying to qualify for your state, and then you're conversely your New England's.
Yeah.
You want to be peaking at the end of the year. What happens at the beginning of the year, sometimes, it's nice to win, but you'd rather be in peak form at the end of the year as opposed to the beginning.
When does winter start? When does winter start, Danny?
Winter technically starts the Monday after Thanksgiving. That's when everyone in the winter sports can start practicing.
So I believe that's the same here.
Yeah, I think so too. Right. And I
think it gets sometimes because the women's team, girls teams used to start, and I believe girls basketball starts a week before boys basketball does because of football.
Yes.
But I think that they can start practicing or getting together at similar dates. It's a mess.
Yeah, I mean, basically up here, the winter sports season starts the Monday after Thanksgiving for all sports.
Yeah, wow. That's about right. Boys basketball does move; they go later. Although the CIAC I've seen wants to move it up, which kind of squeezes it a little bit. Listen, it's a tough thing, but Thanksgiving is such a uniquely like Northeast New England thing. That's basically only a Connecticut thing because Matt still does it. We're the only one who still does it as part of the regular season, and I hate to see it go personally. That's just my 2 cents. I think football is better with traditions and, playing rivalries against your next door neighbors, not, playing playoff games that no one cares about in like early November.
I mean, it's still a big deal. I mean, you go to these communities. I mean, it's not what it was 20, 30 years ago where, you hear these stories. Well, we had 20,000 people at these games. Yeah. I mean, we're not getting that in Massachusetts anymore. If you get 5,000 at a game, that's pretty good. I mean, Gillette Stadium hosts the Super Bowls. So all 8 Super Bowl games there, they probably get maybe roughly 20,000 people total for the 8 games.
Right. And they're kind of sterile. We do it at Rensselaer now, and it's okay. The kids love it, but it's not like an intense atmosphere.
Yeah, and that's another you get some coaches who feel like, it's nice to go there, but you go there, there's no atmosphere because you don't get a lot of people there. I mean, one year the Division I Super Bowl was St. John's Prep and Everett. Division I, the 2 biggest schools, but the weather was terrible. The game was being shown live. if there were 300 people there, I'd be shocked.
Wow. What year was that?
Oof, that would have been about probably about 10, 12 years ago.
Okay.
But it was nasty weather, and people were like in St. John's Prep, had lost to Everett pretty convincingly early in the year, and barring anything crazy, they were going to win again. So people just said, we'll watch it on TV, and that's been another issue. With the Crafts, one thing they've been adamant about is, we'll give you the facility, but they also have the broadcast rights for the games, and they sell a lot of commercial. They will not go. They will not go on tape delay. They're adamant it has to be live or nothing.
Wow.
We barely get that.
Yeah.
Nothing against NFHS. They do a great job, but it's not like that. I mean, that's wild. It's not something I ever really thought of. And even with the championships, again, we had 6 last year in the new, again, we just did a new system that started last year. And we had 6, and the crowds were not great by any stretch.
Now, the funny thing is, because what happened, this would have been probably about 10 years ago, Everett, their head coach, John DiBiaso, his son was a star quarterback. And in those days, there were 9 divisions, so they could never get all 9 games in there. They had to rotate. That year, Everett, that division was on the rotation out of Gillette. And he was very upset. He says, it's my kids last year with the number 1 ranked team in the state. We came and played at Gillette. They wound up playing at Bentley. He said it was the best experience he ever had, because what happened is Bentley only seats like 4,000. They played Lincoln Sudbury, who brought the whole community in. He says, we go out. This was like the old days in the GBS. We'd come out, people yelling at us. It was fantastic. It was a packed house, screaming, everything. He said, I can't believe how good an atmosphere it was. And because it was a packed house and you could hear the people. Whereas opposed to Gillette, it's, like you said, it's very sterile.
Yeah. And like the big reason they do it, and they do it for the basketball championships here too. They have them at Mohegan Sun, which is a great thing. The kids, they get to walk out. But like for the 10 championship games that we have for basketball, one is like crazy packed. It's the D1 boys game or the D2 boys game when Donovan Klingen played in it. But most of the other games, it's just like silence because there's not a lot of people. It's not filling out the bowl. And like even at Central last year, like I was there for 3 games, right? And Sony had a really good crowd, but it wasn't really the kids, it was the town. And then like you throw a Catholic school in there and you're playing middle of December, it was freezing. But it's a whole other thing. Not that this is
we had the basketball at the Garden, and and they moved it out, and it was the same thing. You might get 1,000 people there, but it just wasn't, every so often, one year when Pat Connaughton played there, they had 12,000 people there.
Yeah.
But that was very rare.
Yeah.
Last thing for me, Danny, when that new playoff proposal passed, so that you start basically in November, right? And then you play, what is it? How many rounds? Is it 3 or 4 rounds?
You go 3 rounds, and then the 3 rounds to get to the championship game.
Yeah.
So like this year, the championship, it will be the weekend before Thanksgiving, and then whoever survives goes on to the following week.
Got it. So when they did that, I mean, it passed. So but how contentious was that? Getting that put through.
Oh, there are some people who are upset. Central and Western Mass don't like it because they feel like the power ratings is skewed to favor an Eastern Mass school, and in some cases you could see their point. And it's just, again, it goes back to the old thing. You're never going to make everyone happy. There is a new proposal, as we mentioned, Steve Dembowski, who is, and he has really tried to use a lot of what Connecticut has in the past to try to into his proposal. I mean, the guy has worked very hard at it. I mean, you can't, some people don't like the proposal, but you can't knock the effort he's put in. I mean, he has put in a ton of time and effort into it.
What's the gist of it? I mean, ours is, you play in your league, the league sets your schedule up, and then it's PowerPoints.
Basically, he wants an 11-game schedule with the regular season ending on Thanksgiving, because he feels like now, you may get league titles or playoff berths on the line that day, which is what you don't have now. And he thinks that will bring back more excitement to Thanksgiving. And, he does have points, but the flip side is you're talking about, you start the playoffs, again, you're cutting into the winter season.
Oh my goodness! Where would he have the championship? When would he do? When would he do that?
The championship would then be, I think it would be 2 weeks, 14 days after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, which is what we
So,
do.
and then if you get, in New England, it's not like you're getting 90 and sunny
Yeah.
in mid-December. You could get clobbered pretty good there.
At this rate, it'll snow, be freezing, and then it'll pour because that's what we've gotten all fall anyway.
Exactly.
Well, that's an interesting thing because, like, even now, like with playing on Thanksgiving, quarterfinals are Tuesday, semifinals are Sunday, championships are Saturday. So really, if you play on Thanksgiving, you're playing and you win a state title, or you play in a state title, you're playing like 4 games in what, 16 days or whatever it is.
Now the old system up here, you could play 3 games in 10 days. If you were playing Thanksgiving, the semifinal would be Tuesday, and then the state championship was the following Saturday. And a lot of, the sports medicine committee, they were kind of like, that's, we're asking an awful lot of these kids.
Yeah.
So that's what we do, though, right? That's to get to the semifinals is Thanksgiving,
Right.
Tuesday quarterfinals. So that's 10 days and 6 days. Yeah, 16 days to play 3 games. Apparently, it's not a big deal here because we've been doing that for a while, and we just added 16 more teams to do it. So, and they want to add.
It used to be Tuesday, Saturday. So
we had Thanksgiving. We had Thanksgiving Tuesday, Saturday. That was it, because back then there were only 4 teams in each division got in.
Right.
So essentially it was the 4 league champions. And then that's when people said, A, you're asking too much of the kids, and B, a lot of schools felt like, we've had a great season and nothing to show for it. So then they, went to the power rating system. More teams got in, and that's where we are now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like you guys have the same issues we do. You guys actually made that plunge to start the playoffs in November and then, expand it out a bit, but you still have that Thanksgiving. You haven't get rid of it completely. So it's like you have your cake and eat it too. And
that's it.
tough.
Do you think, is there buyer's remorse up there for the decisions that had been made, since they've made kind of the shift?
What's funny is that the one thing that seems to irk a lot of coaches is if you don't make the playoffs, they have what they call non-playoff games. So you play 2 weeks. And I don't think it's an issue the first weekend, because if you're not in the first 16, realistically, you're probably not a good team. Right. But what I've always argued is that if you're not in the playoffs, you're playing a non-playoff game, you're getting scheduled against a non-playoff team. So it's going to be much more competitive than, say, the old days. One year the Denham coach, he was 1-7. He says, "Hey, 1-7, we don't belong in the playoffs." But what it helped him do is he got 2 games the following weeks against teams that were like 1-7, 2-6. And he said, I'm not looking for 50-0 win. I just want to be competitive. Under the old system here, weeks 9 and 10, I could be playing the 2 best teams in the league. Likely we're going to get clobbered. And then we go into Thanksgiving. Our kids are like 1-9, 1-10. They're just looking to, get it over. They want to be home at 12 o'clock to eat. At least now you get a better feeling, and, that year he's 1-7. He won both games, then had an upset on Thanksgiving. He said, we were 4-7, but we may as well been the 2000, we may as well been the 72 Dolphins, the way those kids felt after that game.
So they added the non-playoff game.
Yeah, and that there are some coaches. See, I think where you get the problem will be like for us, because this is the second weekend. It's the teams that had good seasons and lost in their first playoff game. Now they're in that predicament. And a lot of times coaches say it's very tough to get our kids up.
And they got to play a Thanksgiving. So at least you're playing something before you go into Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Exactly. And, getting to Thanksgiving is not the problem. It's just the game before Thanksgiving when you really have nothing to play for but pride.
Right. It's interesting. It's a lot of different ways to do this. And
absolutely. I mean, you could play devil's advocate. We could be here till 11 o'clock at night with pros and cons of every system.
Unbelievable. Well, that's it. That's football in New England, man.
There you go.
Never a dull moment. All right. Well, Dan, we appreciate you coming on and giving us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Again, we don't talk to you guys nearly enough, and and it's just.
Well, you're a good judge of character, then.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a typical Boston statement right there. Oh boy. Okay. Listen, again, thanks for your perspective, and
My pleasure. Good luck with everything.
All right.
Thanks, Danny. Appreciate it.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Yeah, you too.